Hello, everyone. My name is James Brosnan. I am a program manager over at a little company called Ursa Space Systems. Um, I've done information security. I've done compliance. Compliance is my jam. I've been an auditor. I have ran security risk management teams, IT compliance teams. You name it from like the non-technical side of information security. I've probably done it. Um, it's one of those things that's just near and dear to my heart. I have an MBA, whoop-de-doo, an MIS. I'm also a certified information security manager. Credentials are great. Credentials are awesome, but it's really the experience that shapes us, that creates who we are. And I am a product of all of my experience. And I have worked with many of you on this call today. Dave, thank you so much for that awesome introduction. And with that, let's just get going. So today I'm going to be talking about energizing your culture of security. Culture is one of those things, right? When you think corporate culture, what do you think? What comes to mind when you hear corporate culture? I bet money a lot of you are going to think of Office Space, right? The 1999 comedy film. This guy right here, Bill Lumbergh, is like the poster child for middle management. That's what you think. Corporate culture, you're sitting in a cubicle all day, and I guarantee more than some of you have heard the phrase, I think someone's got a case of the Mondays. Or how about those TPS reports? Did you get those TPS reports in? Right? That jargon, that movie encapsulates corporate culture. Now, corporate culture kind of sets the foundation for all the various subcultures, right? A lot of companies, specifically in the electric utility industry, where I came up in, that's kind of my bread and butter. A lot of companies have a safety culture. Everything is geared towards safety, and rightfully so. There's also compliance cultures, right? And what does compliance culture really mean, right? Well, do people act in a compliant manner? Do they follow the rules? And my favorite, security culture. So the security culture is really that subculture up underneath the corporate culture. Corporate culture informs all of the subcultures. It doesn't matter if it's safety, security, compliance. It inherits some of those traits, the behaviors, the activities, right? The how people feel about security or compliance is generally inherited from that corporate culture. Uh, so culture of security, right? What does it really mean? Well, our friends over at KnowBe4, a security firm, have identified 7 unique dimensions to the culture of security. And these 7 dimensions kind of come together, and they really reflect what it means, for that culture of security. Those 7 dimensions are attitudes, behavior, cognition, communication, again, my favorite, compliance, norms, and responsibilities. Um, these things are not unique to security. These things really could be applied to any and all kinds of culture, whether it's a subculture like safety or compliance, culture at the grocery store, your culture in your neighborhood, right? All of these aspects, all of these dimensions come together to form that culture of security. So let's dive into what each of these actually means. So, and the attitude dimension for your security culture, it's really how people feel about security, right? Do people feel good about the security? Do they feel bad about it? Do they even think about it? Right? That attitude really helps frame how people act about security. The behaviors are actions, activities. Do people act in secure ways? Do they act in compliant ways? Are they doing things that they probably shouldn't? Because, oh, well, security, that's not my job. I don't have to worry about that. That's someone else. That's a security team's job. And I'm just going to do whatever, right? Your behavior really shapes, again, the culture of security. Cognition. Now, cognition is one of the dimensions that I have found helpful to when I talk to teams, especially from a compliance standpoint, from a security standpoint, that it's the cognition that in most cases helps things click. It helps the light bulb go off, right? Because that cognition is the understanding, the knowledge, the awareness of security, of how security topics, security landscapes, threat risk landscapes all come together. That why, more times than not, is the missing piece. So when you explain the why, you explain, hey, we have to do this because X, Y, and Z. A lot of the times people, it clicks for them. Story time. A long, long time ago, I was a compliance analyst, and I came into an organization that really struggled with the compliance. Well, I had come to find out that there was no one explaining the why, right? The compliance analysts on the team that I had joined would go to people, they would go to the subject matter experts and say, well, you need to do this because the regulations say so. Well, that's not good enough. That doesn't give them the understanding of why they need to do something. It doesn't give them the understanding of you have to do this because it's secure for us. It protects our environments. It protects our data, right? It was the cognition piece that was missing in that culture. So after, a little while of giving the why, explaining it, that culture started to build up. And I think we really did end up with a pretty good culture of compliance and security. They almost kind of go hand in hand. Now, communication, the next dimension of the security culture. Communication really speaks to the quality of the communication channels about security, right? Do people understand? Do people know where the security messages are coming from? Do they understand how those messages should be interpreted? A poor culture of security, those communication channels, are probably not well defined. They probably don't communicate very well. In a strong culture of security, the communication channels are well defined. The messages come frequently and they're easy to understand. They're easy for the audience to take it all in, ingest it, and help build that culture of security. Again, compliance. I can talk about compliance for days. Dave knows this. Some other people on the call know this. Compliance, it really comes down to following the policies, following the procedures, right? But what compliance means for your culture of security is, are those policies well defined? Are they available to people? Do people understand them? And do people follow them? Because just because you have a well-defined set of policies, processes, procedures, job aids, what have you, doesn't mean that people really understand the purpose behind them. It doesn't mean that people will follow them. And that's compliance, right? So having that well-defined set of program documentation, not only available to people, but communicating it, providing training, providing awareness on the policies, processes, procedures, helps build up that culture of security, right? If people know what they need to do and they understand the cognition, they have the why of it. Again, it all just comes together to build up that culture of security. Now, norms. So norms, when we talk about norms in a security culture, those are those behaviors that are accepted, those, the activities, the behaviors that people do on a day-to-day basis that really speak to being secure, right? It's things like when you get a suspicious email, hey, maybe you shouldn't click that link, maybe you should report it, versus, whether you get the phishing email and Yeah, you just don't think about it. You click the link and see what happens. You roll the dice. That's not good behavior. That would be an unaccepted behavior, right? So that is your norms. Norms are behaviors that really help drive the culture of security. And the last one is responsibility, right? This one is another one that kind of falls by the wayside ever so often. It's really knowing your role. Now, I've worked at a few places, and roles and responsibilities are sometimes not well defined, sometimes not defined at all, and other times they're very, very well defined, but they're not realistic. So having those responsibilities, one, documented in your policies, processes, procedures, so that everybody knows what they should be doing, how they should be doing that. It really speaks to building that culture of security. Now, one of my one of my favorite things is sayings is security is everyone's job, right? Just because you say it doesn't mean people actually believe it. Because you ask anyone, you say, hey, is security part of your job? And I bet they'll say, no, of course not. That's the security analyst job, or that's the SOC's job. That's not my job, right? I'm a programmer. I don't have to worry about security. Well, that's not really the case, right? And one of the things that I really like to talk about is you can have the best tech stack, you can have the best security tools money can buy. But if you don't have that culture of security, if you don't have that human element, it's all for naught. I mean, all it takes is one person to click a link, right? And then it's all gone. So really what it comes down to is a security culture is the behaviors, the values, the approaches to how people within your company think and act about security. It is so, so, so very foundational to any information security program. It is a wonder that it is not already written into regulations and standards. I mean, you have to have a good security culture if you want your information security program to be successful. Now, getting there, that's the trick, right? And that's kind of why we're all here, is how do we get there? How do we make it fun? How do we energize it? How do we do it? So let's get to it. So how do you energize your culture? How do you get people excited about compliance and security? Well, there's a couple different ways that I personally like to do it. Uh, Awareness and training really sets the message. It sends the message to the organization, to the employees that, hey, this is what we're talking about, right? Security, compliance, being secure, doing the right things, that's the message. Then you need to get people engaged, right? Because it doesn't matter if you send the message out, if people aren't taking that in and engaging with it, they're not really building that culture of security. It's just a message, right? It's out there. It's like a newspaper, right? People don't really read newspapers anymore. So once you have people engaged, right, how do you keep them engaged? You make it fun, make a game out of it, right? Um, for those of you that have kids, how do you get your kid to clean their room? You make a game out of it, make it fun. Same thing with security, right? You make it fun. And then you want to keep that energy going. And when you can do that with security champions, and I will talk about all of these in details with stories. So hold on, let's go. Awareness and training. So awareness and training, those two things go hand in hand. They're often, if not always, required by most frameworks, most regulations. There's always something in there that says, do your annual training, do new hire training, and do some kind of awareness. We don't really care how you do it, but you got to do something. Well, most organizations, they just do the bare minimum, right? They'll slap a poster up on the wall. They'll send out a newsletter. They'll, post an article in like a Slack channel or something for everyone to read at their leisure. Well, that's great and all, but that's the bare minimum. That's not going to get people engaged. I mean, people aren't going to go out of their way and say, "Hey, I'm going to read this article. It's cool, but it's not really for me." So how do you do? How do you make it fun for people? Well, you make it relevant. You make it interesting. You relate it to what they're doing in some kind of way. You don't say, hey, don't forget to change your password or you need to use a strong password. What I like to do is relate it to the real world in some kind of way. You can almost always do it. You can almost always find some kind of data breach, some kind of security incident that can relate to almost anything, right? You can find something that says, oh, well, there was a huge data breach because, oh, someone clicked on a phishing link. Use real world examples. Real world example that I like to use, again, being from the utility industry, tell a little story right here. Back in 2015 at a power plant, an operator was sitting at their computer and all of a sudden their mouse started moving, without any kind of interaction. The mouse started moving and started opening breakers to the electric grid. And all of a sudden there's a power outage and the operators had zero control over it. Now, thankfully, that was not here in America. That was over in the Ukraine. And what had actually happened was someone got an email and they opened an attachment that contained some malware that allowed the bad guys to get into the network. So that's a great real world example. It grabs people's attention, right? Because a lot of people will read some of these articles and go, that can't happen to me. I'm special. I won't click that link. Well, you might. And there's a great example of that. One of the other wells that I like to draw upon for awareness and training is pop culture. Pop culture is a wonderful resource for any cybersecurity topic. You can find almost anything that has to do with cybersecurity or a similar type of security event and draw upon it. And I'll talk a little bit more in an upcoming slide on how I did that. So story time, awareness and training. Every October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. This is a great opportunity. And in the past, I have taken the opportunity to plan out the whole month with everything cybersecurity. So how I did it, personally, is each week I picked a topic and I asked people for feedback. I said, hey, what do you want to learn about? Is there anything specific you would like to learn about? Would you like to, learn about phishing? Everyone loves phishing. Insider threats. Actually, one of the ones that we've been talking about at my current place is shadow IT and how to curb that, because that is a huge, huge, huge security risk. And so the plan for this for next month, actually for this year's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, is we're going to take 1 week and we're going to focus on shadow IT. But how I do it, right? I start the week off with a nice little post to our general channel. That way everyone can see what's going on. Hey guys, it's week 2 of National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and this time we're talking about shadow IT. Here's an article for you at the beginning of the week. Then throughout the week, I like to pepper in some YouTube videos or some games or some quizzes. There's tons of free content available. CISA from the government, you can get games and you can get crossword puzzles and all sorts of stuff with word searches, and throwing that out there for people, just to take a break from their day job and do a little puzzle. You might not think it connects with them from a cybersecurity standpoint, but it really does. Because when they're searching for terms like phishing or malware, they kind of connect the dots and you just kind of pepper that in. So National Cybersecurity Awareness Month has been a great opportunity to help build that culture, because you're getting people engaged, you're getting the message out there. Employee engagement. This is another fun one, right? What this one's all about is it's about getting buy-in. It's about getting feedback. It's about getting input. It's about getting people excited for it. Because as a security professional, I'm the guy that goes, hey, don't forget about security this and don't forget about compliance that. And that doesn't necessarily resonate with everybody. When you get people's input, when you get people's buy-in on what they want to learn about, what is important for them, they have a little bit more sense of ownership for it. It means something a little bit more to them. So I like to cater to people's interests, right? I like to ask them what's important to them. Why do you care about password security? Why do you care about malware, right? Conducting surveys, asking for feedback has probably been the most important thing that I have done in terms of building a security culture, because it not only tells me what the areas that I need to focus on, but it gives people that sense of input, that sense of buy-in. Because I always ask them, I always have an open-ended question. What do you want to learn about? What's important to you? And that's where people will say, oh, well, this is what's important, or how can you relate this to that? So getting that feedback, very, very important. Helps build that engagement. The interactive talks and presentations, much like this, gets people engaged. You make it exciting, you make it entertaining. That grabs people's attention. I already talked about National Cybersecurity Month. It's kind of one of those things that straddles training and awareness and engagement, because we do it from a training and awareness perspective, but we have that engagement because I like to get people to interact. Another big one for engagement is offering incentives and rewards, right? You want to reward people for doing the right thing. You want to reward people for reporting that suspicious email, for noticing something peculiar on their laptop. And sometimes it's as little as celebrating those tiny little wins and saying, hey, thanks to everyone that reported a phishing email. But you could also do like a drawing. You could pick a name out of a hat for, someone that reported 10 suspicious emails. It drives that engagement because then people want to do it. Who doesn't like to win something, right? And it drives that engagement. All right, hold on, another story time. So at a previous company that I worked at, we did these things called lightning talks, which were little 15-minute blocks where you could talk about anything you wanted. I'm a lover of Jurassic Park. It is probably my most favorite movie. And Jurassic Park is a gold mine for cybersecurity lessons. There are so many things in there, from insider threats. It is perhaps the example that I always go to for insider threats, right? Because you have the character Dennis Nedry, right? He's the insider threat. What happens? The guy from the competitor goes to him and says, hey, you steal some IP for me, I'll make you rich. What does he do? He tries to steal it. Doesn't work out for him because dinosaurs and all, but perfect example of insider threats. The other big lesson learned from Jurassic Park that I like to rely on is business continuity and incident response, right? They essentially have a cybersecurity incident, and what did they do? They don't know how to respond to it, so they just shut it off. They turn off the whole system, and they're standing there going, what do I do now? Well, if they had an actual, business continuity plan, they would have known exactly what to do, step by step, how to get their system back up and running. But Jurassic Park is one of those things that I like to draw upon for anything and everything cybersecurity related. And it doesn't hurt that there's dinosaurs involved, because who doesn't love dinosaurs? Gamification really, really, really drives that engagement from your employees. Because at the end of the day, who doesn't like a little friendly competition? You can make almost anything into a game. As I said before, for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, there's tons and tons and tons of free games, puzzles that are available out there for people. You can build your own games, you can build your own puzzles, you can do trivia. Trivia is another fun one. It gets people thinking about cybersecurity topics, puts that little friendly competition in there. And if you do it right, a little prize, right? Because again, who doesn't want to say, hey, I'm the best at this. I won. I know all of this. So yeah, it's really, gamification drives engagement. Setting up scavenger hunts is another fun way. Now, I work completely remote, but if I did work in an office, I would do some kind of scavenger hunt. right? You can lay little tips and tricks and hints around the office and get people to go around and follow them. And at the end of the day, whoever wins it first wins a prize. But if you sprinkle in cybersecurity and information security tips and you make those hints cybersecurity related, not only are they having a good time, but they're also learning about core information security fundamentals. And my favorite is turning phishing into games. Dave, you know about this one. So the phishing derby. So a couple years ago, I thought to myself, hey, how can we turn our phishing simulations into a game, right? Everyone does phishing simulations, whether it's monthly, quarterly, annual, semi-annually, right? Every company on the face of this planet does some kind of phishing simulation. Now, for the regular user, it's not always the most fun because you get this sense of, hey, security is trying to catch us. They're trying to get one over on us. We're just sitting here doing our jobs and they're trying to trick us. Well, that's not really the point of it. But to overcome that, I turned it into a game. I took the month of July, said, hey, we're going to have a friendly little competition. We're going to call it the Fishing Derby. If you want to participate, you can sign up. And hey, you might even win a prize. So we did that one year. We got pretty good turnout. I think we had maybe 15 or 16 people out of like 60 or so, which I think is a pretty good percentage. And so I crafted it to where each week we had a different fish would go out to the pool of people. We would ramp up the difficulty throughout the month. Points were associated with it. The harder they got, the more points they were. I even threw in a surprise one just to keep things interesting. And it turned out really well. People had a lot of fun. It got people talking about fishing, and it was successful enough. Unfortunately, we kind of had like a four-way tie at the end. So we ended up just picking someone randomly. We announced that person to the company and they won a trophy and the bragging rights for the first year. And ever so often we would we would remind everyone that, hey, so-and-so is the fishing champion of 2023. Another very important thing after that is I asked for feedback. I put a survey out there. I said, hey, what worked well? What didn't work well? Was the frequency of the fish about right? Were the topics on point? And what would you do differently next year? And so I took that feedback and the following year, I mixed it up. I made it much more difficult. I added a couple more surprise fish. Good news, we still ended up with like a three-way tie. But that's good. You want people to catch them. So yeah, the fishing derby was successful. Someone new won this time. Again, we picked those one person from those three at random, but that person has the new trophy and the bragging rights until we do it next year. But again, the feedback I got is people love it. It's fun. Security champion. So what a security champion is it's someone in a business unit that's not security related that really advocates for security. Now, I find that this person can help spread security awareness because they're embedded with that team. They know the ins and outs of that team. They know what that team's working on. They know what is important to that team. So they help make the information security topics relevant to themselves, to the rest of the team, and they help spread that message. Now, this person is also very useful for if that security team has a security issue or a concern or whatever, that person typically brings that concern back to us. So it really opens up that communication. It really makes it two-way so that the message goes out and we get feedback in or questions back in. Again, it really helps drive the security culture. It helps make it relevant. It helps people feel that buy-in because people feel like their voice is being heard. And if they have a concern, that they know it's going to be addressed. Story time. So how we did this at one of the jobs that I had previously is we had this thing called the Cybersecurity Committee. Now, the Cybersecurity Committee was not only cybersecurity professionals and leadership. I mean, we had representation from just about every single business unit. And those people were our de facto security champions because they would often bring in concerns or questions from their teams that we could discuss as a committee, and then they could take that message back out. So having that committee, again, it helps people feel that buy-in. It helps people feel like their voice is heard. The cybersecurity committee is still going strong, and it is one of those governing oversight bodies. But having people from other business units really, really goes a long way. So at the end of the day, right, what do executives care about the most? Can you measure it? What's our return on investment? How are you tracking your security culture? Well, there's a few different ways of measuring success, of tracking it, of metrics. One of my favorite, again, is feedback. And you can get this just from having Q&A sessions. You can send out surveys. You can talk to people one-on-one. These are all good avenues for getting that feedback. Surveys, I find, are very helpful. Now, there's a couple different types of surveys that I'm speaking to here. There's the survey that I would send out as a security professional. I would send out a survey occasionally, say, hey, what are we doing? What are we doing well? What are we doing poorly? What are some of the things that you want to see? But then there's also these third-party surveys, and the third-party surveys go out to everyone in your organization. Typically, they're completely optional, but it measures security and the security culture typically against those 7 dimensions. There's one in particular that I've used before in the past, and just like any kind of survey, you don't inherently know what the question's asking, but when you get people to fill it out and compiles the results, it tells you how you do in each of the dimensions. The one that I've used in particular, in some dimensions we did great, in other dimensions maybe we didn't do as great. But what that does is it identifies areas that we can focus on to help drive that culture of security, to help improve it. Because without that feedback, you're just kind of driving blind and you don't know what's going on. But then there's some actual hardcore metrics that you can track that really paints the picture for leadership, for yourself, right? So you know where to focus. Some of the metrics that I like to focus on is awareness and training metrics, right? Training is easy to track, right? Are people doing their annual training, their new hire training? Are they doing it on time? Are they hitting those marks? Are they asking questions? Are they ignoring it? Same goes for awareness. And in some tools, you can see how many views you have on a particular piece of media, others maybe not so much. Phishing metrics are very, very, very important. And it's not just the click rate. The click rate is great. The click rate helps identify the people that might need a little bit more focus. They might need a little more help. But the phishing metric that I find to be important in terms of security culture, that really speaks to security culture, is that reporting metric. So when you do a simulation, it tells you how many people are reporting that suspicious email. That metric right there tells you that you have a good culture of security, because it speaks to the behavior. It speaks to the norms. Are people seeing those emails, and are they asking about them? Because you want that to drive their behavior, and that's a great metric for that. Also, some incident response metrics. Are people asking questions? When they see something suspicious, are they raising their hand? Are they saying, hey, I saw this on my computer, it doesn't look right, can you help me out? Or are they just ignoring it? Because again, that helps identify that, hey, you have a great culture of security, because people are interacting, they're seeing and they're identifying some suspicious things, and they're asking about it. And that's what you want. Here's a little dashboard that I put together. These are the metrics that I like to track. Again, it speaks to not only the health of an information security program, but it also speaks to that culture of security. I've got the phishing ones in there, the awareness, the training, compliance. Again, compliance is my thing. I love to track compliance stuff. But yeah, this helps make it that intangible. How do you track a culture and how do you track the culture evolving over time in a tangible way, in a way that's meaningful for us as security professionals, for leadership, for the board? They need to see something. And this speaks directly to that culture of security and how it evolves and how it changes over time. So as I've spoken in the last few minutes, right? Security culture is so very, very foundational for any information security program. You have to have good security culture if you want to find success. Now, these are just some of the things that I have used throughout my career to help drive and help evolve security cultures, and I hope everyone can take a little something from it and help evolve their security cultures.